The sun was setting over the golden plains of the Serengeti, bleeding red and orange across the horizon as the tall grass swayed with the wind's heavy sigh. Somewhere in the vast wilderness, a lion lay motionless beneath the shade of a lonely acacia tree. His mane, once the color of fire and pride of his reign, was now dull and matted with dust. His ribs showed through his fading golden coat, and his breath came shallow, as though every inhale was a battle he was losing. This was Kuro, once the undisputed king of his territory, feared by rivals, respected by his pride, and known by rangers who had followed his story for years. But now the king was dying, and no one from his pride remained beside him. The law of the wild was cruel. When a lion grew weak, his place was taken, his pride claimed by younger blood. He was left to die alone, forgotten by the same world that once bowed before him. For 3 days Kuro had lain there, his strength dwindling with every rising sun. His wounds, deep gashes from a territorial fight with a younger male, had festered with infection. Buzzing flies hovered around his body. He hadn't eaten in days, and his thirst burned like fire inside him. Each time he tried to lift his head, his legs trembled, refusing to obey him. But deep within his fading eyes still flickered a glint of the old lion, the one who had roared across valleys, who had fought hyenas and rivals and storms. He was dying, yes, but he wasn't ready to surrender just yet. Miles away, in a small ranger outpost near the edge of the reserve, a man sat alone by the radio. His name was Daniel Cole, a wildlife ranger who had spent 15 years protecting these lands. He had watched Kuro grow from a cub, had seen him rise to become the pride's dominant male, and had documented his every move for research and conservation reports. To Daniel, Kuro wasn't just another lion. He was a legend, a living piece of the Savannah's soul. And when the camera trap near the southern ridge had stopped picking up Kuro's movements, Daniel knew something was wrong. At dawn, Daniel loaded his jeep with medical supplies, tranquilizers, and a canister of water. He told no one where he was going. His superiors had strict rules about not interfering with nature's course. But Daniel couldn't sit and watch his old friend die unseen. To him, this wasn't interference, it was compassion. The same compassion the wild too often lacked. The jeep rumbled through the grasslands, scattering birds into the morning air. Daniel scanned the terrain with his binoculars until, hours later, he spotted the unmistakable figure under the tree. His chest tightened. Even from a distance, Kuro looked skeletal, a ghost of the mighty lion he once was. Daniel parked the jeep at a distance and approached slowly, his hands steady but his heart pounding. "Kuro," he whispered, his voice almost breaking. The lion stirred weakly, one eye half open. Recognition flickered there, or maybe it was just the reflection of the fading sun, but for Daniel it was enough. The smell of infection was strong. Flies swarmed around the open wounds along Kuro's flank. Daniel knelt beside him, pouring a small stream of water into a shallow metal dish and pushing it closer. The lion's cracked tongue flicked toward it, taking slow, painful laps. Daniel's eyes welled. "You're not alone, old boy," he murmured. The next few hours passed in silence except for the wind and the distant calls of other lions, perhaps the same pride that had left him behind. Daniel cleaned the wounds with disinfectant, each touch gentle but firm. Kuro flinched but did not attack. It was as if he knew this man meant no harm. He stitched one of the deeper cuts, working quickly under the fading light, his hands trembling from the weight of what he was doing. That night, Daniel made camp beside the tree. The sky turned into a blanket of stars, and the moon rose high, silvering the plains. He lit a small fire to keep away hyenas. They circled in the distance, their glowing eyes watching, waiting for weakness. Daniel didn't sleep. His rifle lay beside him, but his gaze stayed fixed on Kuro. Each shallow breath from the lion felt like a countdown. When dawn broke, Kuro was still alive barely. Daniel opened a can of raw meat he had brought and set it before him. At first, the lion didn't move. Then, with a trembling effort, he dragged the meat closer and began to eat. Tears blurred Daniel's vision. In that moment, he didn't see a beast, he saw life fighting against the inevitable. Days turned into a week. Daniel returned to the outpost for more supplies, lying to his team that he was conducting field research. Each evening he came back to Kuro, bringing food and water. Slowly, the lion's wounds began to heal, though his strength returned only in fragments. Sometimes Daniel would talk to him about his late wife, about the loneliness of living among creatures who didn't speak, but somehow understood more than people ever could. You and I. He'd say, we both lost our families to the same kind of world, cold, unforgiving, but still worth fighting for. One morning, Daniel noticed something unusual, tracks fresh lion prints around the tree. He tensed, scanning the distance. On the ridge stood a lioness and two sub-adults, Kuro's former pride. They watched from afar, cautious, as though sensing that something sacred was unfolding here. The lioness, once Kuro's mate, gave a low growl before retreating. Kuro lifted his head, eyes fixed on the direction they had gone, and let out a soft, rasping rumble, not a roar, but a memory of one. Daniel felt the air shift. The king still remembered his family, even if they had forgotten him. But nature is never still for long. On the 8th night, as Daniel prepared to leave, he heard a sound that froze his blood, the hysterical laughter of hyenas, close. He grabbed his flashlight and rifle and turned just in time to see a pack of them slinking through the grass, drawn by the scent of weakness. Kuro tried to stand but collapsed, his strength not yet fully returned. Daniel fired a warning shot into the air, but the sound only startled them for a moment. The hyenas spread out, circling. Without thinking, Daniel stepped between them and Kuro, shouting, waving his arms, firing again. One hyena lunged forward, the shot missed. Another darted closer from the side. Daniel swung the rifle like a staff, striking it across the snout. The beasts scattered momentarily, their glowing eyes flickering with confusion and anger. Then came the sound, low, deep, ancient. Kuro had risen, staggering but fierce, his mane catching the firelight. He bared his teeth and roared a raw, broken sound that rolled across the plains like thunder. The hyenas faltered. Another roar, stronger this time, followed. Daniel watched in awe as Kuro took a step forward, his legs trembling but his spirit blazing. The hyenas, unwilling to risk the wrath of an awakened king, retreated into the darkness, their laughter fading. When the silence returned, Daniel fell to his knees, breathless. Kuro turned his head, meeting Daniel's gaze. In that silent exchange was everything: gratitude, understanding, farewell. The lion lay down again, exhausted, his head resting on the dry earth. Daniel sat beside him till dawn, the orange sun climbing over the horizon as the savannah awoke around them. Weeks passed. Kuro grew stronger. He could now walk short distances, his wounds reduced to scars. Daniel began releasing him into wider parts of the reserve, watching from a distance. Each day, Kuro ventured farther, following old trails, marking territory again. The pride occasionally appeared in the distance, and though they kept their distance, the lioness would pause, her tail flicking gently as if torn between instinct and memory. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Daniel knew the time had come. He stood a few meters away while Kuro sat upon a rocky hill, the wind running through his mane. The lion turned, locking eyes with him one final time. Daniel whispered, "Go on, my friend, it's your kingdom." Kuro blinked slowly, then turned away, walking toward the horizon where the golden grass met the dying sun. Daniel stood there long after he vanished, the silence of the plains pressing around him. He knew he might never see Kuro again, but that didn't matter. The old lion had lived not because the wild had mercy, but because one man refused to let him die forgotten. Months later, reports came from another ranger. A lone male had been sighted near the southern ridge, scarred but strong, reclaiming old ground. Daniel smiled when he heard it. Kuro had survived against every law of nature, against every expectation. He had become a ghost and a legend all at once. Years later, when Daniel retired, he often sat by the photographs in his study, pictures of elephants, zebras, leopards, and among them, one photo of Kuro, standing tall against the sunrise, his mane ablaze, eyes sharp with that immortal fire. Daniel never told many people about what happened under that acacia tree. It was a secret shared only between two old souls who had met at the edge of death and refused to let it win. But sometimes, on stormy nights, he would dream. In the dream, he was back on the plains, the wind howling through the grass, and from somewhere in the distance came a roar deep, proud, and endless, echoing through the savannah like a heartbeat that never died. And Daniel would wake with tears in his eyes, whispering into the darkness, "Long live the king!"